Hey guys, it's Mike here, and welcome to my first Q&A over here on Laughingstock Cinema, in which I'm going to be answering your subscriber questions and questions related to movies as well as live-action TV shows. Now, as you can see over here on Laughingstock Media is where I asked this question, and that's because I have yet to unlock the community tab over here on Laughingstock Cinema. Hopefully that'll change not too soon in the future, but I'm looking forward to answering many of your movie and live-action TV show related questions. So without further ado, let's get into this Q&A. So the first question is from Garda Trace, and the question is, do you think that Captain Marvel is just going to be some social justice warrior-fueled Mary Sue for the MCU, like she's been in the comics in recent years? Now, in the comics, obviously, they seem to have been a lot more blatant and overt about some of their political messages and kind of social ideas in recent years. This isn't just for Captain Marvel, it also applies to characters like Captain America and Iron Man and Thor and so on. So do I think that's what she's going to be? I mean, it seems like Kevin Feige and the MCU have been a lot better about this. It's not like in Star Wars where it's obvious what Rey is supposed to symbolize and Rose and many of these characters. It's not like in the DC TV shows, which even though they're really good, they kind of like shove that stuff in ham-fistedly. So I feel like she might not really be that SJW kind of character, but she may be a strong female role, which I have no problems with. I just think it's weird that they recently said they're going to do a Miss Marvel in the MCU, which is what she originally was, Carol Danvers. So I'm kind of like, why didn't they just have her start off as Ms. Marvel? And then they have her become Captain Marvel when Marvel dies. But perhaps they're going to do that in the Captain Marvel movie. I don't really know that much about it at this point, at this recording. What are your thoughts on Chucky the Killer Doll? I think I really like the first two movies. I might like Bride of Chucky, but it's been so many years since I've seen it. And that's pretty much it. You know, like some of the movies I feel like are kind of awful. They're just not very well made. Chucky is a very interesting kind of slasher villain or horror villain, whatever you want to classify him as. Not only does he have, you know, I guess some intimidation factor, especially in the first two movies, but it's also the fact that he's like, you know, pretty funny on top of it. You know, some of the ways they kill people, some of the ways that they react to the situations bring some humor, especially in like the later movies. So I feel like it's definitely an interesting franchise, to say the least. Are you interested in seeing Incredibles 2 this July? Yeah, I'm definitely going to see it. I was a really big fan of the first one when it first came out, and I've seen it a good amount of times since. Obviously, there have been so many memes that have come out in relation to it, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. What if Lady Death was in the MCU and Thanos was trying to court her like in the comics and like the post-credit scene of Avengers tease? Do you think that would make Thanos more or less compelling in Infinity War? I mean, obviously it would change his motivation. His motivation is more like a commentary on the ideas of overpopulation, finite resources, kind of the things that we deal with in real life on Earth. You know, it's kind of putting that into the movies and being a kind of commentary and discussion on that. You know, of course, Thanos is the villain, so, you know, it's the question of, is that idea morally wrong? Obviously, that's left up to the audience. Some people, interestingly, have sided with Thanos, but you know, if Thanos was kind of appealing to Lady Death, and the reason he snapped his fingers to erase, you know, half the universe is because of his promise that he made to her very similarly to in the comics, some of that sympathy would probably kind of be removed. You know, it'd be less hard to sympathize with him as a character for that kind of reason, but there's a lot more that they've done in the comics to kind of get around that or kind of make him compelling and interesting in other ways. So there's definitely pluses and minuses to it, but I really would like them to introduce the Lady Death character, especially if they're going to introduce Deadpool, because for those who follow the comics, you know, well after the original Infinity Gauntlet Infinity War storyline came out, there is kind of a love triangle between Thanos, Lady Death, and Deadpool. So that should be interesting to see if they ever bring her in. I'd like to see more of these cosmic entities. We don't even have Mephisto either, you know, like the closest we've come to him is the Ghost Rider movies, and doesn't seem like those did very well. How sad were you after the ending of Logan? I mean, I was more like kind of sad that there wouldn't be more, Logan coming in like the Avengers and other things like that. That was going to be the last of Hugh Jackman's character. I've seen Wolverine die many times in the comics and cartoons, so it's not something that's necessarily super sad to me, even within the confines of the movie, because they could easily find a way to bring him back. I mean, if you read the comics or watch the cartoons, Logan has come back from a skeleton, just because there was enough of his DNA still embedded in his skeleton, or even in the adamantium where he can come back. So they could always do that. I wasn't as big on Logan as a lot of other people were, but it was definitely one of my favorite movies of that year. Do you prefer Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man? Definitely Tobey Maguire. I mean, even though his expressions when he cries and stuff can be kind of hilarious, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man was pretty awful. Like, a lot of people praise him when he's in the suit, but like his Peter Parker was awful. And much of what Spider-Man did, especially in the second movie, is just awful too. So, even though I think the first one isn't as bad as a lot of people make it out to be, the fact of the matter is that I just don't like him very much in that role. And I'm not saying he's not a good actor, because if you watch The Social Network and movies like Silence, you could see that he's a good actor. It's just that everything that was written in those movies, the way they were set up, was just obviously not good, and was the result of so much corporate meddling on Sony's end, which is kind of why I'm not really looking forward to Venom as much as a lot of other people are. But I guess we'll see when that movie comes out. Do you think that Solo and Episode 9 in Star Wars are going to be good? I don't know about Solo. I hope Episode 9 is. To be honest, I don't really like Rogue One that much. I liked it a good amount when I first saw it, but on subsequent revisits, it really does not hold up. It's a mess of a movie. You can tell that they had those reshoots, and you can tell, so many issues with the writing involved in the movie, and how characters are wasted, not really fleshed out. And the entire idea of the movie is literally summed up in the opening crawl of Episode 4, so you can argue it's about as pointless as the Solo movie. And obviously Episode 8, I am not a fan of in the least. It's perhaps my least favorite Star Wars movie, although I really don't really care for Episode 1 or Episode 2, especially Episode 2, which is just arguably the worst by far. So I hope Episode 9 will be good, because let's have some more good Star Wars. Let's not just be miserable all the time and go to these movies as if they're like a funeral instead of like a fun event. Are you interested in seeing Wreck-It Ralph 2, Ralph Breaks the Internet, this November? Yeah, I finally saw Wreck-It Ralph recently. It's really good, so I'm definitely going to check that out. Who are your favorite movie directors? What movies from them do you recommend watching? That's a really difficult question, because I have favorite directors per different generations, different genres. Overall, I guess in terms of really famous directors or directors that might be a little easier to get into, I would definitely recommend Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan has never made a bad movie as far as I'm concerned, even if I'm not a huge fan of all of them. And I would recommend just watching any or really all of his movies, because they're great. And Stanley Kubrick, of course, is a great director who made movies such as Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Full Metal Jacket. So he's a great director to check out. Francis Ford Coppola made some great movies in the 70s and 80s. If you're more interested in something a little darker, a little bit more, I guess, graphic, Nicholas Winding Refn has made some great movies such as Drive, Pusher, and most recently Only God Forgives, which was very polarizing, so you might not like that one, but maybe I'll do a video about this, because I really have a lot of favorite directors. But, in terms of action where you can't go wrong, I would say Nolan or John McTiernan. Almost all of his movies are really good, except for the last two, which just watch the ones before that. What are your thoughts on Ready Player One and the new trilogy of the Planet of the Apes? Never saw Ready Player One. I had zero interest in that. It's a video game movie in all the ways I don't care for a video game movie, or a movie being playing like a video game. And the new Planet of the Apes movies are excellent. Definitely watch those if you haven't gotten the chance. They were just shockingly good when you really think about it, especially considering the last one we got before that was the Tim Burton movie. In Thor Ragnarok, Odin explains to Thor that Mjolnir isn't the source of his power, but rather something that he can use to channel his power, and that Thor needed to find and master the use of his full power, resulting on the events of fighting Hulk and later Hela. In Avengers Infinity War, that plot was thrown away after he was defeated by Thanos and his children, and telling the Guardians of the Galaxy that he needs a new hammer in order to defeat Thanos. Doesn't that make the whole purpose of his conversation with Odin pointless? Why all this trouble if he's going to get a new hammer anyway? Isn't that inconsistent writing? I guess you can argue yes, but at the same point, it's kind of like, you know, Thor has his power on his own individually. You know, he is the god of thunder. He can channel that power without using a hammer. But ultimately, I'm sure that a hammer is going to make his power, you know, even easier to channel, even easier to use. And at the same time, the new hammer he got was meant to be, you know, kind of a counter, I guess, to the Infinity Gauntlet. It was still made by the same guy, Peter Dinklage, whatever his character's name is, you know, from a dying star in the same exact place the Infinity Gauntlet was made. I mean, you can argue that that shouldn't make any difference because Thanos with the Reality Stone could just turn the hammer into steam or something like Dr. Manhattan. But, you know, some of the writing and power scaling and stuff in Infinity War wasn't the best, you know, because obviously Thanos, the second he gets all of the stones in the gauntlet, would be able to beat everyone just with a thought. But, you know, it's a movie. They had to make some kind of opposition, and I'm sure that they're not just going to totally abandon that, because if they did, that would be disappointing. Can Hulk beat Thanos in Infinity War if Thanos had no stone? This is an interesting question because it's something that I wondered when I was watching the movie. Because when Thanos fights Hulk, he does have the purple power stone, which he got from Xandar. I guess that he devastated the planet and took it off screen, which I would have liked to see on screen. That's another thing I thought about the movie. It kind of seems like it starts maybe a few scenes in instead of at the natural starting point. So it is questionable if he really could beat him without the stone, but if you read the comics, you could definitely see that he's way more powerful in the comics without even using artifacts than Hulk is, and he like basically bitch slaps Hulk and Drax at the same time without even wearing the gauntlet. So it would make sense if he could, but it's kind of difficult to really say for a fact because he was using it when he fought the Hulk. Who will end up with Fox, Disney or Comcast? I really hope Disney, because I'm tired of these characters not being in the MCU already, like the X-Men and Silver Surfer and Galactus and so on and so forth. But, you know, Comcast might sneak in there and take it from them, which is going to make a lot of fans very unhappy, you know. Maybe they should think from a PR perspective about this, because unless they're going to pull a Sony and do a deal with Disney, which could be a good idea, you know, fans probably aren't going to be happy that once again they're going to have their hopes and dreams, I guess, denied by not having the characters in the MCU. Have you ever seen the movie Don't Blink? No. Which Avengers do you want to come back? I want everyone who turned into sand to come back and everyone who died differently to stay dead. There's a lot of characters I would like to come back. Quicksilver was completely wasted. He was so much better in the late edition version of Days of Future Past. Gamora is awesome. Loki is really cool. So I wouldn't mind all these characters coming back, but somebody's got to stay dead. And I have a feeling that at least, you know, some of the ones who didn't die with the stone are going to be dead in the next movie. When will DBN do YouTube videos again? I keep asking him on Twitter, but he never responds. Eventually. What are your thoughts on Loki's death in Infinity War? It was kind of weird, you know, like, it was cool to like set the stakes. It was an idea that Thanos basically killed him and showed his strength and showed how big of a threat he really is. But it was weird because like Loki could have just manipulated the situation to where he would go to Earth and be in a much better position. You know, he would be able to get out of there and he'd be able to maybe even help the Avengers. But he just randomly tries to stab Thanos like in the chest or in the throat, which is like, why would you do that? Why did you even try to do that? You know, but that's, I guess, kind of a nitpick with the movie. Do you think since the heroes Ant-Man and Hawkeye were left out of Infinity War and are the only ones with kids, do you think that they are dead? And what do you think the trickle-down effects will be on the TV shows? I mean, I don't know if any of the TV show characters are going to die. I mean, maybe they will, but, you know, it seems like they want to keep them separately. I don't care at all about Hawkeye or, you know, even Scarlett Johansson's character for that much, despite the fact that it is Scarlett Johansson. You know, Ant-Man, I'm pretty sure both of them are still alive and they'll show up because they need some backup heroes, and I doubt they're going to be dead, but I'm sure that they already confirmed it somewhere. I just haven't read it because I guess I'd rather just watch the movies to find out. What a novel idea. Why didn't Doctor Strange or Thor just cut Thanos' arm/hand off and then take the gauntlet and then teleport it elsewhere? I mean, for all we know, Thanos like manipulated his body with the reality stone to where even if his arm is cut off, he could still use the gauntlet and just like reattach it. You know, the thing is that Doctor Strange looked into the future, he saw millions of different possibilities, and he was like, oh, we only win one. And so I'm assuming that the reason why he didn't do this or that is simply because he wouldn't be able to win that way. Like, even if they took the gauntlet from Thanos, he'd probably kill them all and find a way to get it back, just because even without the gauntlet, he could kill any of them, and I doubt that any of them have the power to truly wield that gauntlet without, like, going mad, or without, like, the blowback and the ramifications really hurting them. Thanos is a special character, you know, he's an Eternal, but at the same time, he's a mutant even among Eternals, so he's a guy who just can wield this power, but, you know, his own internal ideas about himself are that he doesn't really believe he should have that power. Is that going to be the same way in the movies? I don't know. How big is Drax's dick? Ask Melina. What do you think will happen in Avengers 4? I'll do a video on that. It's going to be too long of an explanation for this. Okay, thanks, no problem. Batman Samurai, I have yet to see it, but I think it looks like a cool idea. I've heard it isn't very well written, but, you know, the art style looks interesting, aside from it being CG, which I'm not the biggest fan of some CG anime or animation. You know, I always prefer that hand-drawn style, especially for, like, the DC animation, but, you know, I might check it out. What do you think is the best decade for movies? That's really difficult. Perhaps the 1970s or 80s. I mean, even the 90s were great. You know, you had movies like Terminator 2, Jurassic Park. I believe Aliens came out in 1990, maybe 89. So, you know, 1990s are really good. The 80s were really great for movies. So many great movies. And of course, you know, the 1970s had so many great movies. So maybe one of those three. Although, I mean, there's like dark horses like the 1950s, you know, even. So that's definitely a good question. What is your favorite twist ending? I mean, for me, it's probably The Empire Strikes Back. I know that obviously everyone knows what the twist of Empire Strikes Back is now, even if you haven't even seen the movie. But Empire Strikes Back really might have had the best twist of all time. And I just wish that I was there in theaters when it was airing for the first time, like the premiere or something, and just watched everyone's minds be completely blown by that revelation, because, you know, it really is a big deal, especially when you just go into those movies blind. But anyway, guys, this has been an LSC Q&A, a Q&A over here on Laughingstock Cinema. Let me know your own answers to these questions down below in the comments, as well as your own thoughts about possible future videos, you know. Let me know some suggestions. Also, make sure to subscribe to this channel and enable notifications so you can see all of my content right away when it comes out. And if you like this video, then make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe, enable those damn notifications.